Every so often, we're lucky enough to run across a book that has content that just speaks to your soul. That's how I felt when I ran across The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. It is just a refreshing, thoughtful, and eminently practical guide to stimulate your thinking and actions for all the types of gatherings that you are going to design. I want to highlight for you about a half dozen of the key takeaways that I continue to apply after my reading of the book. The first is this notion of templates and designs. And I think of this when I've worked in designing my own meetings and workshops or working with clients on designing theirs. There's kind of a natural tendency in some cases to do what I call the search and replace. We take last year's agenda, we take last year's template, we just erase all the specifics, and we start to plug in new session titles, new speakers into that exact same template. Parker cautions us against the downsides of doing that, suggesting that we often choose the template and the activities and structures that go along with it before we're clear on purpose. And you say, how can that be? We have an annual conference, it's our major event. We know what the purpose is. Do you? When was the last time you revisited that? When was the last time you kind of did the 5 why test? Outlining the purpose for the event and then drilling down and asking, why does that matter? What value does it create? Looking at your answer to that set of responses and again asking, why does that matter? What value does it create? I think when we drill down, we'll discover that our purpose has gotten muddied over time. And when we have that clarity of purpose, it really is able to refresh and relaunch the value that we're trying to create for any particular gathering. Parker has a great analogy that I love, talking about purpose is your bouncer. You can think of the security guard at the door to the nightclub who's deciding who to let in and who to keep out. When we have a clarity of purpose, it can do the same thing for every decision that we make for the meeting, whether that be a big decision or a tactical level detail. We can look at those decisions through the prism of purpose and decide what should fit and what should be kept out. I think when you really apply purpose, you're going to find that you start to make different decisions in all kinds of ways, from the speakers that you suggest, from the formats for general sessions, from the way that meals are served, from the room sets. It will start to infuse itself in a way that will orchestrate and create a much more integrated and powerful experience for everyone attending your gathering. Parker says that the more focused and particular a gathering is, the more narrowly it frames itself and the more passion it arouses. And that makes a lot of sense to me. When we have a real clear purpose that is very specific, that is very focused and is somewhat narrow, we're going to be attracting like-minded participants. And there's going to be this kind of symbiotic relationship between purpose and participant. Many of us have to plan events, though, that have a much more general purpose and a much more diverse group of stakeholders. And I think what we need to do is create what I consider to be pockets of more focus and more narrow purpose within that. You can think of an annual conference that maybe convenes people by regions or by states or around functional areas or around topical interests or around hobbies, something that creates that more narrow pocket in the larger general field of the overall event. Parker notes that asking guests to contribute to a gathering ahead of time changes their perceptions of it. In one of his books, Patrick Lencioni, a popular business author, uses the phrase that weighing in is buying in. I think of 4 ways that I often invite people to weigh in on an event. The first is pretty common, a needs assessment. What do you want to learn? What do you hope to get out of this event? I also include kind of a preferences, finding out what types of formats are more comfortable for them. What are they less likely to get excited about if it's included in the event? Second is something I find increasingly valuable, and that's sharing a draft agenda for feedback. It's one thing to ask people their needs, design an agenda based on it, and then have people show up for that event. It's another thing to ask them their needs, design a draft agenda, and then go back to them for feedback and say, here's what you told me. Here's what I've created. How close am I? Where am I missing the mark? What refinements might you suggest that would make this agenda even more powerful or more valuable for you? I like to involve people in community building before the event if possible. That can be responding to just a 2 or 3 question survey that elicits some of their thoughts about the reason that we're convening, the topic at hand. maybe a resource that they would suggest, but in some way starting to initiate that networking process. And I think that's particularly important if we're convening a group of people where folks do not have established relationships. And then finally, I ask if there's some way that I can involve people in making a connection to the content in advance. That may be giving individual participants different quotes related to our content and then asking them to come prepared to react to that content. I can then build on that when we convene in some sort of an initial networking or ice-breaking exercise. One of the concepts that really resonated with me was when Parker talks about hosting with general authority, and specifically the three elements to that: protecting your guest, equalizing your guest, and connecting your guest. Protecting your guest makes me think about creating that safe, equitable, and inclusive climate, a post that I recently made in my Substack newsletter. We need to create an environment that supports people in bringing their best and complete self to the conversations and the activities. And that means thinking about what is going to create discomfort and how might we redesign or provide support to reduce the sense of vulnerability that some individuals may experience. One of the ways that we can do that is equalizing your guests. And this made me flash back to two books by Edgar Schein: one, Helping, and two, his book, Humble Inquiry. In both of those books, Schein talks about the importance of reducing status differential. It's not unusual when you have a group of people where if their boss is in the room, they may feel like they always need to defer to the person in power. And so they're less likely to contribute or to share alternative perspectives. We have to find ways using process and formats to neutralize that power and status differential so that there's a greater sense of equality and equity among our individuals who are participating. And then finally, connecting our guests, not only to each other, but I also think about connecting them to the content and the value that matters most to them. When we think about connections, Parker is wise to remind us that we have to design our gatherings for the kind of connections that we want to create. Um, and I would build on that and say not only the kind of connections that we want to create, but the kind of connections that participants want to experience. I find that's a missed question, one that is not included on enough needs assessment. Given the purpose for the event and the people who are likely to attend, what are the connections that would be most valuable for you if you were able to experience them at some point during the workshop, the meeting, the conference, the social events? We need to understand the connections that people will value most, and then look at the different elements of the meeting, the workshop, the social event, and figure out how might we design those to increase the likelihood that those types of connections actually occur. When we've done all of this effectively, it creates an environment that will support good controversy. I love Parker's introduction of this notion of good controversy. It seems like kind of a juxtaposition or an oxymoron. Good controversy is a kind of contention that helps people look more closely at what they care about when there is a real danger in doing so. This isn't about conflict among people. This is about controversy over passion and ideas. The conversations might still get charged or heated in a way that at the surface level seems like, whoa, we don't want any of this. But it's really reflecting is that you're tapping into the emotional connection that people have. They're talking about something that they care about enough that they're willing to risk staking a position, making a claim, challenging others in a manner that they might not otherwise do. Good controversy is generative rather than preservationist. We know we've succeeded in creating good controversy when people aren't looking to just preserve their existing opinions. They're willing to collaborate, to thoughtfully entertain others' perspectives in order to generate a new position, a new product, a new program, a new service, a new possibility that otherwise they may not have envisioned. These are just a few of the highlights from The Art of Gathering, a book that I wholeheartedly recommend that you add to your collection of reading on how to design more effective meetings and conferences. If I can be of any assistance in helping you build your competence and confidence to design and facilitate better discussions and decisions and results, I'd welcome speaking with you about that possibility.